Today, December 15th, 2025, we are starting with some breaking news. And this hits incredibly close to home, even though it stems directly from the conflict in Eastern Europe.
Right.
The stunning piece of collateral damage is this. Russia's sanctions are actively hurting American workers, and the impact is highly concentrated right here in the Port Authority region. Just 2 days ago, a crucial federal authorization expired, and now, hundreds of jobs and businesses are facing complete operational chaos.
And this isn't about Moscow.
No, this is about Main Street. This is about local cash registers, gas station owners, and our own infrastructure projects. I'm Alex. Join me with Aria in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover the acute, localized economic and legal costs New Jersey has paid in its mission to stand firmly with Ukraine against Russian aggression.
That's right. Because when Washington, Trenton, and Newark all tried to project strength overseas, to show solidarity, the fallout created this significant, measurable domestic friction.
So this deep dive is really about that friction.
Exactly. We're looking at specific harms from these huge legal battles over state versus federal power, all the way to crippling supply chain shocks that hit consumer prices right here.
This is a critical deep dive for anyone who wants to understand how geopolitical policy, something that feels so remote, actually translates into regulatory chaos and, frankly, cost of living concerns for American families.
We are showing you the receipts.
And hey, before we jump in, if this is the kind of analysis you're looking for, please subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. Okay, so let's unpack this. And let's start with, I think, the most immediate and personal story. The backlash against Russian-branded companies.
Right. The Lukoil story.
The Lukoil story.
Lukoil became the immediate lightning rod. Very early in the conflict, the Newark City Council, driven by this, deep sense of moral outrage, voted unanimously to suspend the operating licenses of 2 Lukoil gas stations in the city.
Just citing the company's Moscow base.
That was it. But what's truly fascinating is how quickly that symbolic action just slammed American small business owners.
Right. The collateral damage was almost immediate.
It was. The owner of one of those franchises, a man named Roger Verma, an American immigrant, he was just baffled. He kept stressing, these aren't Russian state enterprises.
No, they're local franchises.
Yeah, exactly. They employ New Jersey residents. He had 16 employees. And the fuel, this is the crucial part, the fuel they sell comes from a local Phillips 66 refinery.
So it wasn't even Russian oil.
Not at all. The whole thing was, it was political theater that ended up harming Americans trying to make a living.
So you have that local political hit, and then on top of that, you get the massive operational impact from the federal sanctions.
And that's the core problem. The sanctions forced what the industry calls financial de-risking.
Okay, what does that mean in simple terms?
It means the big banks looked at the compliance risk, the chance they might accidentally violate a complex sanctions rule and get hit with massive federal fines, and they just said, it's not worth it.
So they just cut them off.
They cut them off. Major players like Citibank and BCB Bancorp terminated their relationships with Lukoil North America entirely.
So for a small franchise owner, a franchisee, their business is suddenly seen as financially radioactive by the big banks.
Precisely. And that's an immediate operational emergency. Think about how you pay for gas.
Credit card.
Always.
Right. As much as 85% of sales at these stations are made with credit, debit, or prepaid cards. Losing those banking relationships meant they literally couldn't process transactions.
So the revenue just stops.
It stops, or it slows to a trickle. It was a big problem that threatened to force all these stations to go cash only just to survive.
Which would kill their business. Absolutely. So this situation got so dire, the federal government's own Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, the agency that writes the rules.
They had to step in.
They had to step in and fix their own mess. They issued a temporary targeted license just to allow payment processing to continue for these franchises.
So they basically kept over 100 American small businesses from going under.
For a time, yes.
Yeah.
But that temporary fix?
Yeah.
It was always tenuous.
And as we said at the top, we're recording this on December 15th, 2025. That authorization expired 2 days ago.
It expired on the 13th. And that leaves the 110 stations in New Jersey. And I want to stress, that's 60% of the entire U.S. Lukoil network.
60% are in New Jersey.
Yeah. Suddenly, they're right back in that limbo, facing renewed financial chaos.
So the risk didn't go away. It just shifted.
That's a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
The risk got pushed down. When the big national banks pulled out, a couple of smaller New Jersey-based banks, Ocean First Bank and Park Bancorp, they stepped in to handle some transactions.
So the small local guys had to pick up the slack.
Right, which is a perfect example of how global geopolitical risk gets funneled down and concentrated in the regional banking sector. You're forcing smaller banks to take on these huge compliance burdens just to keep local gas stations open.
Okay, so that's the banking crisis. Let's shift to the legal arena, because beyond the municipalities, the state of New Jersey itself tried to take action.
Oh, they did. A very robust action. Governor Phil Murphy signed a law, PL 2022 C.3.
And this was the state's big attempt to prohibit its own agencies from doing business with anyone involved in, quote, prohibited activities in Russia or Belarus.
And the bipartisan support for this was huge. The idea was to use the state's power of the purse, to cut off any financial ties to Russia.
But the devil's in the details, right? How they define prohibited activities.
Exactly. They made the definition extremely broad. It included any company headquartered in Russia or Belarus, or even one that just had a Russian government equity share. They were trying for maximum impact.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because a New Jersey-based company, Kyocera, decided to challenge this law in court.
Right. Kyocera Document Solutions America. They employ 200 people in New Jersey.
Wait, Kyocera is Japanese. Why would a Japanese company with New Jersey employees sue the state over sanctions aimed at Russia?
Because the state law was so aggressive, so broad, it created this collateral damage. Kyocera America's parent company is in Japan, but that parent company also owned a separate, totally different subsidiary called Kyocera Russia.
I see.
So even though Kyocera America was fully compliant with every single federal sanction,
Trenton's law caught them in its net.
it did. Because of that distant relationship, they were suddenly blocked from renewing their essential state contracts.
And what did the court say?
The courts sided with the company. A federal district court judge ruled that the New Jersey law was likely unconstitutional on the grounds of something called conflict preemption.
Okay, let's unpack that legal term, conflict preemption, because it's at the heart of this.
It sounds abstract, but it's simple. Think of it like this. The federal government, through OFAC, is trying to turn a very precise valve to apply just the right amount of economic pressure on Russia.
A carefully calibrated national strategy.
Exactly. And New Jersey, with the best of intentions, came along and tried to install its own massive, clumsy pipe right next to that federal valve.
So they were interfering with the strategy even though they were trying to help.
Precisely. The court basically said you can't have two different plumbing systems. The federal government has to speak with one voice in foreign policy. New Jersey's law undermined that careful federal calibration.
And the outcome was a temporary restraining order, a TRO, that just slammed the brakes on the state's law.
It did. But here's the thing, the regulatory mess persists. Even today, businesses applying for state subsidies from the NJDI still have to fill out paperwork that references the mandates of this partially nullified law.
So it's just creating useless administrative overhead.
It is. It shifts the cost of geopolitical chaos away from Moscow and directly onto a compliant New Jersey business, just trying to get a subsidy.
Okay, so regulatory chaos hits businesses. But for the average person, the cost was even more direct. It went straight into their wallet.
Right, through commodity shock.
Mm.
If you zoom out, the actual value of trade between the Port Authority region and Russia or Ukraine is pretty small, only about 1.2% of total trade.
But that's misleading.
It is, because the impact is concentrated like a laser beam in a few strategically critical sectors. And that leads to acute inflationary pressure.
So let's start with the most obvious one, energy. It impacts every single person.
Historically, Russian oil made up nearly 10% of New Jersey's total oil imports.
10%. Now put that in context for us.
The national average was only 2%. New Jersey was 5 times more reliant on Russian oil than the rest of the country.
Why so high?
It's likely due to specific regional refining capacity and, existing long-term contracts. It was a hidden vulnerability just waiting to be exposed.
And that raises the critical question. What happens when 10% of your critical supply just vanishes overnight because of sanctions?
Well, you have to scramble to replace it on a volatile global market.
Ugh.
And that cessation of supply exposes New Jersey consumers and the transportation sector to much greater gasoline price volatility than most other states.
So it contributes directly to the high cost of living that everyone's already feeling.
That 10% reliance became a massive vulnerability. And it's not just about filling up your car.
Right. Let's talk about manufacturing. Metals.
Primary metal manufacturing imports from Russia averaged $1.5 billion a year into the Port Authority region.
1.5 billion.
Yes. And this is the foundational material for construction, for manufacturing. So that disruption triggered a vertical inflation shock that just rippled through the whole economy.
Well, I don't see the numbers on that.
The numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
National producer prices for iron and steel surged by 68% compared to the prior year, right in the aftermath of the sanctions.
68%. That's astronomical.
It is. And that increase gets transferred directly into the cost of everything. Municipal bridge repairs, new housing, consumer goods.
So every taxpayer in New Jersey is paying a premium on infrastructure today because of that commodity shock.
And we shouldn't forget the other side of the coin either, the export side. New Jersey industries, particularly in things like specialty chemicals and pharmaceuticals, lost access to advantageous trade tariffs that Russia used to offer.
So higher costs for imports, fewer opportunities for exports, a double hit.
It's a double economic hit, exactly.
And all of these international complexities, they land hard in New Jersey precisely because the state's economic foundation was already a bit shaky.
That's a crucial point. Geopolitical pressure is never applied in a vacuum. New Jersey is currently ranked number 49 in the country for business friendliness.
49 out of 50.
Right. And its unemployment rate has been climbing since 2022. So geopolitical instability acts as a compounding factor on that existing weakness.
So if you're a multinational corporation looking to invest, and you see a state with a poor business environment and a government that's creating its own unpredictable, legally tenuous regulations,
It massively increases the perceived risk. It's a deterrent.
it seems like the big takeaway is that these state-level efforts, while motivated by, admirable solidarity with Ukraine, they have to be strategically refined to avoid these kinds of domestic harms.
They do. And we also have to talk about the state's own money, specifically the Public Worker Pension Fund.
Right, the state-mandated divestment of all Russian holdings from that fund.
And divestment is a necessary act of solidarity, but it has a quantifiable financial risk. You're forcing the sale of assets, potentially during a period of market volatility caused by the conflict itself.
So you could be selling at a loss.
You realize losses, or at the very least, you have heightened transaction costs. And that ultimately impacts the long-term financial security of the public workers who depend on that fund.
So looking forward, what's the call to action for New Jersey policy from all this?
It's clear. Focus on regulatory stability in your own structural issues first. And maybe most importantly, conduct mandated supply chain audits to insulate the state from future geopolitical shocks.
You have to know where your vulnerabilities are before the crisis hits.
Exactly. The domestic cost of international solidarity has to be minimized through smarter policy. It can't just be absorbed by local businesses and consumers.
So we've covered the ground from local gas station chaos to federal court intervention to these massive inflationary pressures on steel and oil. And the deep dive reveals that while support for Ukraine and sanctions on Russia are absolutely crucial, the operational and legal costs often get absorbed disproportionately by local American businesses and consumers.
And the legal battles confirmed it. Foreign policy has to speak with one strong federal voice. But the economic impacts show that the ripple effects are localized and they are measurable.
It's a sobering reminder that demonstrating international solidarity sometimes comes with a hefty, hidden domestic price tag.
It really is. And as you think about all this, consider a final thought. Russia's economy, partly because of a surge in military spending and its pivot to countries like China and India, has shown unexpected resilience.
So the question is?
The question is, did the localized cost borne by New Jersey residents, the higher gas prices, the 68% steel inflation, the business chaos, did that outweigh the proportional economic damage we intended to inflict on Moscow? That's the strategic balance we always have to assess.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex Honoria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. And one last time, please subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.